There is a lot to be quite cynical about when you hear people like LizTruss rattling their saber, saying that they're going to get rid of the Northern Ireland Protocol. And while it is, of course, very, very, very worrying, don't get me wrong, it's very, very worrying that she's obviously making these types of noises and doing, the saber rattling. But there's part of me that's like, is this just a distraction? Is this trying to once again distract people and trying to get people to move on from Partygate, trying to distract people from obviously the cost of living crisis, trying to distract people from inflation and trying to get them back on track and saying, get them to, ooh rah rah, root for Brexit type of thing? It does certainly seem very well timed, to say the least. And obviously, again, with the Northern Ireland Stormont elections as well, there was obviously this was going to come up as an issue. So obviously, while I am a bit cynical, obviously coming up now, it was always going to happen, especially at this time. And again, looking at the polls and how the DUP were going to do. So obviously, going forward, this is not good in any way, shape, or form. This will only end. Basically, in the UK, we'll end up in a trade war with the EU and possibly with the US as well, because they are not happy. If you've been keeping an eye on what's been going on over there, indeed, I think it was Oliver Dowden said that Biden should keep his nose out of these issues. He does realize that the US was like one of the guarantors, a neutral party guaranteeing the Good Friday Agreement, right? But of course, we've heard a lot of comments from some, quote, legal experts, and I have to put these legal experts in air quotes because these come from the government saying, oh yes, we can break the law, not in a limited and specific way, but we can just go out and break international law. Well, turns out a lot of other experts, far more credible experts in the area of law, have turned around and said, what on earth are you doing in this area? So we're going to go have a look at what they had to say about all this, because there has been a lot of noise from the government very recently, and even LizTruss saying that for her it was perfectly legal that she was about to essentially rip up the Northern Ireland Protocol, and she couldn't be more further from the truth. Surprise, surprise. Then, of course, before we go diving into that, please do remember to hit the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page and a notification link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And as always, there are the YouTube subscriptions and of course the YouTube thank you button as well. So on we go. There we go. So this comes from The Guardian with the title of Experts Scorn the UK Government Claim that it can ditch parts of the Northern Ireland Protocol. Claims that the UK government has discovered a legal justification for tearing up large parts of Brexit agreements in Northern Ireland have been greeted by scorn by expert lawyers. The Attorney General Suva Braverman has reportedly approved overriding the Northern Ireland Protocol on grounds that it is being unfairly enforced by the EU. How exactly? I'd like to know that myself. Her submission is understood to be based on the external advice and claims that the EU's disproportionate and unreasonable implementation is undermining the Good Friday Agreement, according to the Times. But George Perez, a QC and a barrister who specialises in EU law, told The Guardian, I cannot see how any lawyer could possibly advise the government that they've got a slam dunk case. What I've seen so far doesn't give them a sustainable legal cover. Sir Jonathan Jones, who was also resigned as the head of government's legal department back in 2020 when ministers last threatened to ditch parts of the protocol, told the BBC Radio 4's PM Today programme, saying, the government knew about the Good Friday Agreement when it entered into this protocol, and the protocol is said to be a way of protecting the interests of the Good Friday Agreement. So the idea that it has now become a basis for walking away from the protocol, I think, is very problematic. On Thursday, the Foreign Secretary Liz Truss reiterated the UK plan to scrap parts of the protocol, telling the EU's Brexit negotiator it was, quote, a matter of internal peace and security. And according to the Times, Brevon's advice says that the Good Friday Agreement has, quote, primordial significance over the protocol, and the current implementation is creating social unrest. Perez went on to say that the primordial significance is not a legal term that I've ever come across. Catherine Bernard, a professor again in EU law at Trinity College, Cambridge, agreed and said there is no hierarchy of treaties in law. The Good Friday Agreement may be a policy priority, but it has no primacy in law. She said that the UK could come up with a legal argument for invoking Article 16, which allows for the suspending of some obligatory obligations under the protocol if specific difficulties could be proved. But this was, quote, very limited in the scope and time subject to the review. She said that the legal requirement for ditching the protocol was an extremely high bar. Perez even reckoned that the government would even struggle to try and even justify invoking Article 16 based on economic problems, because these were known about in advance, saying it was pretty obvious that both parties putting down a border in the Irish Sea was going to divert trade. So that would be a very bizarre argument, he said. He also added the growing sectarian tensions reportedly cited by Berman would not be enough to overturn an international treaty, saying, in international law, social unrest is not a basis for denouncing a treaty which you signed. Brevin also reported a claim about the primacy of the Good Friday Agreement over the protocol also runs counter to the text of the agreement, Perez says, saying that Article 1.3 says the protocol is not only consistent with the Good Friday Agreement, but necessary to it, he said. He pointed out that this principle had been held up in the Court of Appeal, saying the government itself had already argued strenuously in court that the protocol is entirely consistent with the Good Friday Agreement. So I do not see how this can be possible. How can this be even possible to get off the ground? You may remember just a couple of months ago, you saw a couple of Brexiteers trying to argue this very same point. And of course, this argument that the government is trying to use now is the exact same one that they were using, which the government was using to defend the protocol. That the protocol currently defends the Good Friday Agreement. It's necessary to it. That's what we saw in that court case just a couple of months ago. The more you think about the craziness of this, the more bizarre it gets. It really is. Bernard called for Bremen's advice to be made public. Perez said that the government may be very reluctant to publish, he said, saying, when I was a government lawyer 30 years ago, it was drummed into me that you had never ever to publicize an attorney general's advice. The advice may be guarded and nuanced, but he says that the arguments against it are quite strong, and to publish something like that is not that impressive. Some lawyers have even backed the government's plan for a bill to override the protocol. They include Martin Ho, the chair of the pro-Brexit group Lawyers for Britain. In a Telegraph article he wrote last month, he said this: the EU must be brought to recognise that no sovereign and independent state can tolerate a part of its territory being subject to foreign courts and laws. The EU would understand that once the bill came in and became law, they would lose the power to continue to impose the protocol. So that then creates a hard border in Northern Ireland, because you've got to defend the integrity of the single market. That then puts what do you then do about the border between, again, the north of Ireland and the Republic of Ireland? The second you start and say something like that, how do you solve that problem? Doing that and saying, oh, independence, sovereignty, foreign courts can't, being subject on its territory. Well, how do you solve that problem that you intend to create by trying to abolish the Northern Ireland Protocol? A problem that this thing that you created to solve a problem because the Brexiteers said that Boris's version of the protocol was far, far better than Theresa May's, which was part of the reason, the justification for getting rid of her and putting Boris in the first place. Just yeah, you really cannot make some of this up sometimes. You really just can't. Perez said this was a very minority view among lawyers, saying, if the advice is all about the conditions for exercising Article 16, this is something the government might arguably able to run. As to whether there's an argument for simply just ditching part of the treaties on the basis that the text isn't binding on the UK anymore, that's much more different. I think there's a general agreement about that. He also went on to add, I have no idea to the extent of which the government has even hawked around the bar until it found a lawyer who was prepared to say what it wants, but that is possible. So, yeah. Are we surprised by this? No. This was always going to be a problem. We said it right the way, going right back to 2016. How do you solve this problem? The Good Friday Agreement says very clearly there cannot be a border between the north of Ireland and the Republic. Just cannot be one, or else you basically just destroy the Good Friday Agreement, flat out, simply. Now, you want, quote, the Northern Ireland to be part of the UK. There are ways to solve this. Either A, we rejoin the customs union and single market. Again, that was on the Leave campaign vote. Or you put a border down the Irish Sea and you split off Northern Ireland from the rest of the UK. Like, those are the only two options that you have. And of course, Boris lied to the DUP to get them on side to get rid of Theresa May. He then very quickly threw them under the bus. And then, of course, the wonderful Brexit deal that was put out by them saying this is all fantastic, it's going to be wonderful, it's going to be great, was pushed through Parliament. This doesn't need to be scrutinised, just push, get it through, get Brexit done. And of course, 4 months later, they're always saying, oh my God, this Northern Ireland Protocol is absolutely awful. Why, how did the EU force us to do this? With pictures, of Boris Johnson very clearly with a massive smile on his face, and even video evidence, back shortly before Christmas saying how wonderful this deal was. But as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button on your way out. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you all next time.